Welcome back to your nightmares, my children. This is Mr. Midnight speaking. I welcome you all to my humble abode. So today, we'll look at 4 creepy stalker stories that will terrify you and make you look over your shoulder. Let's begin, and always remember, the darkness always follows. I will now leave you with my narrator, so enjoy.
I think someone is stalking me at work. I work at a large crafting store in California and have been there for a year and 8 months now. A little background before I explain what's been going on is needed. So last year we hired Guy, we'll name Hayden. Hayden was a little quiet on the first day, but quickly became more talkative, and over the next couple of weeks started to never stop talking. He would constantly say weird shiz. For instance, one day he was put in charge of building furniture. Our store carries stuff like furniture and home decor as well. He was apparently having difficulty assembling the table he was working on and said something about cutting his wrists and he can't figure out how to put it together. Another time, we were both working in the stockroom and he kept talking about how much he looked like the Parkland shooter Nicholas Cruz. I'll admit he did in fact look like that kid, which was creepy. I remember one day I had gotten off work and was waiting for my ride to pick me up when out of nowhere Hayden walked up behind me. He just stood there with an awkward smile on his face and I politely asked him, "What's up?" He said something to the effect of, "Oh, nothing much, just enjoying my lunch break. I'm thinking about going inside Taco Bell, right across the parking lot from our work, and shanking someone." He pretty much laughed and said he was joking after saying that. When my wife picked me up, we saw him walking towards the Taco Bell and just flashed us this creepy ass ear to ear smile. So the last straw for me was when he and I were assigned to work our spring freight and get it loaded up on a large U-boat. Our shift started at 7 a.m. and was over at noon. It was 11 and we still hadn't finished our task because Hayden just wouldn't stop goofing around. He would also work very slowly on purpose and would only take one item to the U-boat at once. Our boss came to where we were working and was upset that we weren't done yet. He told us we would both get written up if the job wasn't finished before we were off. I was pissed off at this point, and Hayden knew it. He seemed to feel bad for pretty much getting me in trouble and apologized. He then said something that really concerned me. He said, in the most serious tone I had ever heard him speak since meeting him, "If I get fired, I'll shoot this place up." He went on to say that knew where all the emergency exits are and would first shoot all the cashiers and then move on to the other employees in the store. I'll admit that I didn't immediately report what he said, but it did have me on edge and I kept thinking about what if. After some convincing from my wife, I finally did the right thing and informed my manager. They took a written report from me and contacted the police. After 2 more days of working with Hayden, he was fired and subsequently arrested for his threats. The week after he got arrested, my boss had a meeting with the entire staff and told everyone what happened. After everyone left the meeting, he pulled me aside and revealed to me when the police and Hayden talked about during the interrogation. I don't completely remember what was said, but Hayden apparently admitted that he said what he said and kept asking if I had been the one who reported him. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. I was working at the same store, still am, and I was heading to the break room for my final break when I heard a voice from one of the aisles to the left. A man was standing next to the paint case and asked if I could get him some paint. While I was opening the case, he addressed me by my name, which I immediately thought was weird because I wasn't wearing my name tag on this particular day. Out of curiosity, I asked him how he knew my name, and he said it was just a lucky guess. To which I thought was BS, mainly because his tone of voice seemed sarcastic. The entire time I was getting his paint, he was staring at me with a smirk on his face. He then began to ask me questions about my name, which is the same name of a popular TV show character. He asked what year I was born, why my parents decided to give me that name, etc. At this point, I started to walk away, and as I had other things to do, and the whole time I was walking away, he was still trying to talk to me. I heard him yelling my name from 3 aisles down. I went and stood in the warehouse until I thought he was gone. Later that same day, one of my co-workers asked me if I knew the guy who was buying the paint, and I told her I didn't. She told me that he had approached her and asked her all kinds of questions about me, like if I'm a good worker and if she likes me as a co-worker. This is an ongoing issue too, as he's come into the store 2 other times, one being yesterday during my day off, and apparently asked where I was. I don't know for sure, but I suspect that this guy might be cousins with Hayden, as they sort of look alike and have similar mannerisms. Both look similar to the Parkland shooter and have that same creepy vibe. This might not be the scariest thing on here, but it's still freaky. I'll update if anything else happens. Hey guys, so I didn't expect the responses I've gotten, but thanks so much for all the advice. I am safe and have reported this matter to my manager, who is thankfully taking this very seriously. I have not seen my potential stalker, and I'm hoping to never see him again. Update. Tonight I worked the closing shift and was outside getting carts after the store closed at 8 p.m. when 2 SUVs pulled into the parking lot. One of them parked behind the store and the other one parked in the main parking lot. I was standing in front of the entrance doors when a man dressed in all black and wearing a hood stepped out of one of the SUVs. Another guy walked up next to him and they both started approaching the store. I politely told them we were closed, and then I looked down to notice a large baseball bat in hoodie guy's hand. I started repeatedly ringing the bell to be let back inside, and these two guys were just pacing back and forth in the lot, staring right at me. My manager let me in and called the police. The guys were long gone when they got there. This could have easily been a totally unrelated incident, but I thought I'd still update because the whole thing makes me think it could be you know who. My stalker became my roommate's boyfriend. I was telling a friend my story of once having a stalker, and she referred me to this podcast and forum. This happened years ago and still affects me to this day. I apologize for the length ahead in advance, but I feel like I have to tell the whole story. The summer after I graduated high school, I was still living at home. I was up late once night and was packing for a camping trip with my friends. It was unbelievably hot and had the windows open as I sat and folded clothes. It was around 2 in the morning, and the next thing I knew, there was a hand coming through the gap in the screen of my window. I screamed and the hand flew back out. I was stunned, but there was a part of me that wondered if it was my younger brother pranking me. I got up and looked out the window and just saw a figure of a man staring back at me. I ran into my brother's room and he was there playing video games. We called the police, who came and searched the area. They found nothing, warned me and my parents to lock the windows and doors, and left. We were all still shaken up, and my mum had a feeling that he would come back. It turns out her mother's intuition was right. She went outside and waited on our back porch. After 20 minutes or so, she saw the man, dressed in black, slink into our backyard along the tree There wasn't a fence on that side, unfortunately. He hid behind a tree for a few seconds and ran to another tree and hid there, slowly working his way towards my window. My mother yelled something to him and he took off running. The police came back out again, found no trace of him. I never opened that window again, not even the curtains. My parents installed some motion detecting lights, and that seemed to be the end of that. After 6 months later, my friend and I got an apartment downtown together. We were really excited as this was our first place on our own. The apartment wasn't exactly the best quality, but it was so fun to be living in the city. The downside was that it was street parking only. After a few weeks, my car was broken into. Nothing was taken but a single rose sat on the passenger seat. It was creepy, but I vowed to be vigilant and safe. I always tried to park close to the entrance, near the lights, but often it was difficult to get those spots, and I would often have to park farther away on the dark streets. Things quickly began escalating at this point. My car was broken into at least once a week. Most of the time, a flower was left, which I always threw on the ground. But once a pair of men's underwear was left, and even more creepily, once a bag of Tootsie Rolls, as they were my favorite candy. This made me wonder if the person knew me personally, and I started to become suspicious of everyone. There was a laundry in the basement of the apartment, and one day I went down to get a load that finished drying. As I started to fold, I realized all of my undergarments, bras, and panties were gone. Another week, I had a male friend over from school, and his tires got slashed during the visit. By the time the first letter arrived, I had already started making plans to move elsewhere. The letter described a love for me that had been going on for years. He noted things that proved he had been watching me closely. I was able to arrange for another friend to take over my lease, and I moved in with another friend on the other side of the city. It was a secure building and had an underground parking garage that was only accessible to tenants. I felt much more secure, and the extra money spent was well worth the peace of mind. Things were quiet for a few months, and then my roommate got a boyfriend. Most of us were wary of Ashley's new boyfriend from the beginning. For one, they met on MySpace after he reached out to her. Another reason was that the new boyfriend, Matt, was extremely good looking, and while Ashley was a wonderful person, she just wasn't the type you would typically expect someone like him to date. Ashley was thrilled. She had never had a boyfriend and really felt like he was her Prince Charming. I thought he was weird and creepy from the beginning. Matt was on the quiet side and always seemed to be sporting an uncomfortable, leering smile. It was difficult to carry on any sort of a conversation with him because he would always make it weird with some random facts that were completely unrelated to what we were talking about. I had deleted MySpace when the initial stalking began, but I created a dummy account to learn more about Matt. It didn't look like he really knew any of his friends in real life. There were only pictures of himself, and the rest of the information was vague. My friends and I gently tried to discourage her from seeing Matt. He technically hadn't done anything wrong, but he was just so strange. She would immediately get defensive and would shut the conversation down. Matt started to spend more time at the apartment, and I found myself finding any excuse I could to avoid coming home. One day I came home from work and found Matt on my couch, alone, drinking a beer. Ashley had been called into work, and she told him he could just hang out. I was furious because I didn't want to spend any time with him, so I grabbed a beer and a snack and headed off to my room and shut the door. About 30 minutes or so, he knocked on my door and suggested we watch some TV and get to know each other better because we both loved Ashley. I didn't want to, but decided that maybe I needed to give it a try. He put on a movie and I tried to just focus on the movie because I didn't want to talk. At one point, I glanced over to Matt and he was staring at me with a smile on his face. I snapped a "what" at him, and he just continued smiling and said, "I just can't believe it." "Believe what?" I asked. He said nothing and went back to watching the movie. Still smiling, I had no idea what he was talking about, but the interaction had every hair standing up on my body. I excused myself and locked the door to my room. Another month or so went on, and I had managed to avoid being home for much anything beyond sleep and showering. Matt practically lived there and had even brought a bunch of his things into Ashley's room. I really didn't want to move again, but was beginning to look for other options. On their 6-month anniversary, I saw a huge bouquet of flowers on the table, and an already open card propped up next to it. I rolled my eyes and was about to leave when I decided to see what the weirdo wrote to her. When I opened the card, my heart started beating through my chest. Without even reading the words he wrote, I was shaking. The handwriting was exactly the same as the one my stalker had sent. I had kept them as evidence and dug them out of my desk for comparison. The handwriting was unique and identical. Matt was the stalker. I called the police first. As they were on the way, I called Ashley and asked her to come over. She was at work but said she would be there when she could. I was terrified to tell her because I knew she would be shattered. The police took a statement from me and actually went to Ashley's work to get more information from her. And they ended up breaking the news. Apparently, Ashley called Matt and left a furious message, even though the cops told her not to say anything, and he completely disappeared after that. There was no Matt or anyone matching his resemblance at the place he said he worked. Ashley had never been to his apartment because he said he had been staying with friends while trying to save money for a trip to Europe. His family lived out of state, and she had never met a friend of his because he said they had a falling out because he went choosing to spend so much time with Ashley. It was all lies, and in the end, she was dating a stranger. We don't even know if Matt was his real name. The cherry on the top of this whole thing was when we went through Matt's things. He had left everything when he disappeared, and Ashley and I decided to go through everything. There was a duffel bag that was full of gym clothes. But in one of the compartments, there were about 10 pictures of me. All were taken from far away, with the exception of one of me sleeping. The sheets were current, so I knew it had to have been at the current apartment. Before I started locking my bedroom door, a few pictures dated back to before the incident at my parents' house, which made us think and link that was him as well. 2 pairs of my missing underwear were there, and I shuddered to think of what he did with the rest. A Starbucks lid with my red lipstick marks, a necklace I hadn't even noticed missing, a few other random sick souvenirs. The police never tracked him down. I decided to accept an opportunity overseas that I had been considering and got the hell out of there. Unfortunately, Ashley and I quickly drifted apart. She had a really hard time accepting that her first love was a complete psycho. I think I had some underlying anger, maybe misplaced, for believing all of his lies and letting him into our lives. I don't know what his endgame was. Would he have tried to hurt me, or was he simply content with being in my world? I'll never know. Being stalked changes you. Even when I lived across the world, I looked over my shoulder everywhere I went. I still have no social media accounts attached to my real name. I am married with children and know that he moved on to torment some other poor women. But every time I visit my hometown, I am tense and keep a low profile. Part of me will always worry that Matt will resurface again. A random stalker now has my address thanks to the police. I was driving home when I realized a truck had been behind me for miles. Just to be precautious, I made an abrupt last second U-turn. He did too. It was there that I realized he was following me. While on the phone with 911, I made sharp turns and ran the lights to try to lose him. He wouldn't stop, literally almost hitting my car a couple of times as he sped up trying to catch up. The 911 operator instructed me to go to a local grocery store and wait for the police. I parked right in front of the store's entrance, surveillance cameras, and waited. He decided to park his car at a distance and waited for me to get out of my car. All of a sudden, I heard a hard knock at window. I freaked out, and it turned out to be the grocery manager letting me know 911 just notified him of the situation. He asked if I wanted to go inside the store and he would protect me until the cops arrived. I honestly feared the worst and told him no. I was shaking, but I thought this maniac might have a gun. He could shoot me and everyone in there. Cops arrived and luckily cornered him in the back of the parking structure. I was shaking as they came to my car, my hand gripping my wheel very tightly. They arrested him soon after for a third DUI and police filed a report. I didn't know who he was. Apparently he lived a couple of miles away from me. Unfortunately, 2 months later, I received a letter to notify me that I may be subpoenaed. I called the DME who issued the letter, and they notified me that not only is he free again, but that my information, including my address, were on the police report that was provided to him and his attorney. Thanks, LAPD. I now live in fear. He may come one day, or any day, and hurt me. Being stalked by my neighbor. Hi everyone. I'm really writing this out as a way to vent because I'm in a situation where I feel really stuck. Any advice is appreciated, but I'm not sure there's anything that can be said that will actually help. I've tried just about everything. I'm going to start from the beginning. This is a story 2 years in the making, so I'll try to be as thorough as possible. In 2019, I graduated with my master's degree and moved to a relatively rural area for my PhD, thinking we'd make an investment. My dad and I purchased a house. The intent was to rent it out once I completed my PhD. This house was only a block away from a dive bar, where my dad was able to make some pretty good friends. He introduced me to everyone, and everyone let me know that I would be so happy in my new house because my next door neighbor was the absolute nicest guy you could ever meet. So we met the neighbor, and he did seem nice enough. He suggested we exchange numbers just in case I ever needed anything, and I thought that was a good idea. What's the worst that could happen? A few days later, my dad left to go back to his home in another state, and I was left to my own devices. Literally the day he left, it started. My neighbor texted me while I was away and let me know he left a gift for me on my front porch. In this text exchange, he started using pet names like Sweetie and Cutie. I went home and he had left a hand-painted feeding dish for my cats in my mailbox. At this point, I wasn't that alarmed. He was just being nice, I thought. The next day, he sent me more texts with pet names, and I took the opportunity to make sure he knew I was not interested in anything romantic. He replied back with a rambling text about how all a person ever needs is friends, and he would like to be friends with me. After that, he would send me texts frequently. Everything from inviting me fishing to telling me he left more gifts on my porch. I would often not reply, or I would tell him I'm busy. I didn't want to be rude, but I also had no interest in any sort of relationship with him other than neighborly. One night, I got a text from the manager of the bar down the street, letting me know that if my neighbor knocked on my door, I shouldn't answer. She then told me that my neighbor had walked down to the bar with a hatchet and told the bartender he was hearing voices that got louder as he got closer to the bar. He threatened to kill someone with a hatchet if the voices didn't stop. They called the police, and the police took the hatchet from him, but made no arrest. The manager of the bar picked me up, and I spent the night at her house. She told me that the police said my neighbor was on meth. After that, I tried to keep my distance even more. But things got even weirder. One day I went out of my car to find a dead squirrel in my driveway. The squirrel had very clearly been run over and moved to right in front of my driver's side door. I just stepped over it, got in my car, and left. When I returned home, the squirrel was gone. Shortly after, I received a text from my neighbor that said, "Someone or something put a dead squirrel in your driveway. Don't worry, I moved it for you." I felt like this was a weird way to word this, and I suspect he is the one who put the squirrel in my driveway. Another time I walked out to my house to see he had placed an unspent shotgun shell on the bricks in his front yard. He came out and told me that it was to serve as a warning for anyone walking between our houses. For the next couple of months, I did my best to avoid him. He would text me inviting me over, and I would come up with an excuse or just ignore him completely. I wanted to remain cordial, since he was my neighbor, but it was getting very annoying, and I was uncomfortable. He would text me as soon as I got home. Around Halloween, he handcrafted a large casket and wrote, "Here lies the last son of a bee who played mind games. November 2012. What the heck? All this time, still sending me texts. Eventually, I got fed up and I stopped responding completely. Less than 2 weeks after I stopped responding completely, he threw a 50-pound flower pot at my front door. You know those big concrete planters? Yeah, one of those. I called the police, who advised me to get a stalking no contact order. A few days later, I was watching TV when a notification popped up that my neighbor was trying to cast a video to my screen. I declined it twice. I filed another report with the police. During this time, I started the process of getting a stalking no contact order. I saw 3 different victim advocates who all told me different things. I went out of town for a conference, and during that time, someone had attempted to break into my house. I had an ADT security system, so while they didn't succeed, I was aware of the attempt. After the conference, I came home to the entire world shutting down because of COVID. I was trapped in my home 24/7 with my stalker neighbor next door. Luckily, court proceedings for protection orders didn't stop. Right before court, he sent me a text telling me he was sorry for what he'd done, that he could tell when he saw me outside that he made me uncomfortable. Then he went on to tell me he can tell my hair has gotten longer and I look beautiful. I went to court and provided all of the evidence I had, the timeline of everything that had ever happened. The text he'd sent me asking if I wanted a massage. The text I sent him telling him the way he was speaking to me was inappropriate. The text saying that he knew he made me uncomfortable. I told the judge that I suspected he had attempted to break into my house while I was out of town. The kicker is he didn't deny any of it. Actually, he told the judge that he took full accountability for everything. He said he was in recovery and was trying to turn over a new leaf. He didn't oppose the protection order at all. So in March 2020, I actually received the stalking no contact order. Everything was pretty quiet for a while. I mean, he did some weird shiz, but that's because he was a weird guy. It wasn't anything that made me fear for my safety. That is, until he got on drugs again. At this time, we found an unspent shotgun casing in my flower bed. It was consistent with the one he had previously used to send a warning. This occurred a couple of months after I started dating my boyfriend, and I suspect it was a warning to him. After this, and for a variety of reasons, my boyfriend moved in with me. He moved in pretty quickly, but everything turned out fine. We're still together and as happy in our relationship as we can be. New Year's 2021, I was awoken to yelling. I turned on my security cameras and got footage of him sticking his head out his window and screaming obscenities at my bedroom window for about 7 minutes. It doesn't sound like a long time, but when your stalker is screaming threats and obscenities, 7 minutes is a long time. He called me a harlot. He said happy bloody New Year. He said he was going to blow up his house with his gas line. I called the police, who responded. They told me that he never said my name, so they can't prove it was a violation of the protection order. The officer said, and I quote, "There's nothing illegal about yelling in your own house." They left without even speaking to him. All I could do at this point was do my best to avoid him. I parked on the street because my driveway is pretty close to his front porch. I got used to living with my curtains drawn. I always made sure my cameras were charged, all 5 of them. Yes, because of him, I spent over 1,000 on cameras. Every inch of my yard is covered. Since then, he's been seen by me and my other neighbors talking to people who aren't there, going outside and screaming nonsense. Things like, "I have Cheerios on my necklace," or "I'll put my pee in your butt." I'm not even joking. This basically brings me to last week. In the morning, I was getting ready for the day when I heard screaming. "Someone is going to die over this straight shirt." I turned on the cameras. I got footage of him walking around the alley behind my house screaming, "Are you bloody proud? How about I get my shotgun? I get everybody all fired up." I called the police. Once again, they didn't charge him with a violation of the protection order. Instead, they gave him an ordinance violation for disturbing the peace. The police told me that it seems like he's off his medication again, and that was that. They left. Last night, I was awoken to hammering outside my window at 1 a.m. He was cutting down his privacy fence horizontally. I called the police for a noise complaint, and they just told him to stop, and that was that. As I write this, he's outside, continuing to horizontally cut down his privacy fence. That means the privacy fence only stands about 3 feet tall now. This was the one thing that made me feel relatively safe about hanging out in my backyard, and now that's gone. All of this is to say I'm bloody tired. I just want to live in a house where I can be sure that my neighbor won't try to kill me, where I can feel confident that he's not going to try to break in. My boyfriend and I are trying to buy a house to move, but it's difficult. I'm a PhD student, so I don't have much money. Renting won't work because I have 4 cats, plus my partner's cat and dog, although we have a place secured for them if necessary. And finding a place to rent with so many animals is difficult, if not impossible. I refuse to rehome them, so maybe it's partially my fault I'm stuck in this situation. My dad has agreed to co-sign on another mortgage, and I've gotten a second job. We should be able to save up enough money within a few months, but until then, I'm stuck. I just don't know what else to do. I'm tired. I'm angry. So I figured I'd write this to vent. If you made it this far, thanks for reading it all. There's still so many different instances that I've left out. I'm just so exhausted.
Well, my children, I thank you all for listening. I hope these 4 scary stories frighten you to your core and make you think twice before walking down the street. And I hope these stories make you look over your shoulder. I'll see you again very soon, so until then, love the darkness as it always follows.